Joining us now on the John Fredericks Show, disruptor of the day, Gavin Clarkson, running for U.S. Senate, New Mexico. He's concerned about the lack of job opportunities for his students. Dr. Gavin Clarkson is running as a Republican to fill the open seat in New Mexico by the retiring Tom Udall, and he's joining us now. Gavin, great to have you, man.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, everybody's writing this seat off as it's going to be a Democratic seat. Udall got 56% of the vote. It's turning blue, yada, yada, yada. But I've heard from the Trump campaign, 2020, they are looking at New Mexico as a state they're going to make great investment in and expand their map and maybe flip it in 2020. Gavin, what say you?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. The president's team is going to spend, I've heard somewhere between $20 and $30 million to flip New Mexico, and it's because the Democrats have been taken over by the radical progressives, and like they always do, they've overreached. And so what's happened in New Mexico is the Democrat Party has become, even more so than nationally, the party of late-term abortion, become the party of infanticide. The Green New Deal will kill all of the energy jobs in New Mexico. But the president's team has focused primarily on the late-term abortion issue because, unfortunately, New Mexico is the late-term abortion capital of the Western Hemisphere. And most people didn't realize that. But because the progressive left overreached, they were actually trying in this last legislative session to eliminate conscience protections for doctors and nurses who didn't want to perform abortions. And they were forced to, on the floor of the legislature, to admit that they supported the existing state law, which was abortion up until the day of birth. And it got worse than that, because then they were forced to admit that they supported the existing state policy that if a baby survives an abortion attempt, the official state policy is to toss the baby in the sink and watch it die. And that level of depravity and barbarity is something that most New Mexicans had no idea that that's what the Democrat Party stood for. And so you have a large segment of independents and of people who are Democrats simply because their parents or their grandparents may have voted Democrat, particularly devout Catholic Hispanic Democrats who are just saying, I don't stand for that. 70% of Democrats who identify as pro-choice have a big problem with late-term abortion. And if every single Democrat that's running, that could be potentially running against me, has already said they're for abortion up until the day of birth, there's going to be a lot of independents and Democrats that are saying, I can't support that. And then you add the fact that we're the only economy in the Southwest that's shrinking. We have basically 4 oil and gas counties that are propping up the economy of the entire state, and yet the Democrats are all in for the Green New Deal. The latest economic study says that will probably cost every New Mexico household at least $70,000. It would be economically devastating. And then you have the issue of the border. Now, I am married to a legal immigrant who followed the rules. Her family has a history of fleeing tyranny and socialism. Her father's family fled Mussolini in Italy. The mom's family fled Franco in Spain. Right. They ended up in Argentina, where they encountered more statism and more socialism. And so they fled. The mom fled to Venezuela, where she encountered Hugo Chavez. So eventually my wife comes to the U.S. She learns English by listening to country music while cleaning other people's houses. It takes her 14 years to become a citizen. She is now one of the top medical estheticians in the United States. She's a proud American. She looks at all the asylum fraud and the cheating that goes on, and like many Hispanics, she just says, that's not fair. It is not fair to the people who follow the rules to allow this rampant asylum fraud. So you're going to have a large number of Hispanics that are going to be voting for the rule of law. And then the other reason why we can win in New Mexico, particularly with a candidate like me, is I'm a tribal member. My father was the first American Indian to fly a jet. And I've been spending the last 20 years working on tribal economic development, creating jobs in poor and rural and tribal areas. And the Democrats have no solution for jobs. 95% of my students leave the state when they graduate. And that brain drain is something that's not sustainable. And so my proposal to create jobs and focusing on creating jobs in the tribal areas is something that I've been able to demonstrate. We can get tribal members to vote for a Republican as long as that Republican has a plan for creating economic prosperity. When I ran, I was a replacement candidate last cycle for Secretary of State. I got in the race late, but because I had a positive message of economic empowerment, I carry 25% of the Navajo Nation. No Republican had ever done better than 5%. If you've got 10% of the state as our tribal members, and you make that vote competitive, that's a 10-point swing. If I'm right behind the president on the ballot, that's going to help the president get reelected, and that will help flip that open seat over to the Republicans in 2020.
Look, I think you got a hell of a shot, and your resume were with Dr. Gavin Clarkson, Republican candidate, U.S. Senate, New Mexico, open seat, Tom Udall retiring. Ned, I think Lejeune got in the race on the Democratic side. He's going to be the favorite. But if you can be this nominee, just to give you an idea of what Dr. Clarkson has accomplished here, he just told you he's a member of the Choctaw Nation. He earned his MBA from Rice University in Houston. I hope he's a Houston Astro fan like I am. He got his doctorate in technology and operations management from Harvard. And Gavin Clarkson is also the only doctoral graduate in the history of the Harvard Business School who has placed in a livestock show. So you got it all going on, Dr. Clarkson. I was just in New Mexico last week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I was there at Sunland Park just across from El Paso looking at the new wall put up by WeBuildTheWall.us. And I spent 2 days there in Sunland Park, New Mexico, talking to a lot of people and right there in the downtown area. And, people are split on Trump. Half, I went with my hat. Half the people I talked to gave me a thumbs up. The other half were like thumbs down. So you're in kind of a split area. But tell me about what you have to do. Who do you have to beat in order to be the Republican nominee? How does that work? Give us the lay of the land.
Well, okay. Well, so on the Democrat side, the likely nominee is Ben Ray Lujan, who is I guess he's the assistant speaker in the House.
Right.
He's Nancy Pelosi's number 4 over there.
Right.
He's sort of the socialist candidate, and then you have the George Soros Bernie Sanders candidate is our current Secretary of State. So you sort of have a cage match. It's the socialist versus the communist. Whatever it is, it's a cage match to figure out who can drive the Democrat Party farther and farther into the ditch on the left. At the moment, I'm the only officially declared Republican. I've heard that there may be some people getting in. And again, I don't have a problem with the primary, but the main thing is to focus on consolidating, getting voters to focus on the need to create jobs, the need to create economic prosperity, to be able to reach out to voters that typically don't vote Republican. New Mexico does not have it's not a majority Republican state. It's Democrats do have a voter registration advantage, but the largest group, the fastest growing group, are the independents. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be able to have a message that reaches out to them, and that's the message of economic prosperity, because everybody needs a job. My vision for New Mexico is real simple. You imagine in New Mexico where we raise up our kids, we send them off to school, and it doesn't have to be college. I mean, I am a college professor. I guarantee you more than half of what we teach in the university is totally useless. As a business professor, I hope I'm teaching the useful half. But I also teach vocational education, and I'm a big fan of the skilled trades, because every economy needs people who can build and fix and make and raise and grow things. But imagine where we send off our kids to school, whether it be college or whether it be trade school, and then they come back home and they get a job in the community where they grow up that pays enough for them to be able to raise their family in that community. And we get to watch our grandbabies rodeo and do Little League on the weekends. And that is a vision that we can all get behind, regardless of party or no party at all.
Right.
I'm a big believer in the power of grandma's wisdom. I grew up with grandma at home, but most people in New Mexico, their grandkids are several states away. the power of those extended family networks have been broken because Democrats have made New Mexico the most business unfriendly state in the country. So we've got to be able to create an environment where entrepreneurs can succeed and thrive, and because small business is the engine of job creation in this country.
Look, Dr. Clarkson, other people are going to definitely get in this race, but it seems to me that you've got the energy and the fortitude in order to really take it to who I think, like you say, Ray LeJeune is going to be the Democratic nominee in your district. I mean, this is a tough flip, but I think without a doubt it can be done. Let me just ask you though, are you, if you get to the U.S. Senate, are you going to fight for President Trump's America First agenda? And are you going to be a senator that's up there that is actually going to fight for the president? Because there's a lot that don't.
Well, that's a very good question, and that's a question that you should be asking of everybody. In my case, the answer is already in front of you. I was President Trump's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Economic Development. So not only am I a Trump supporter, I'm a former Trump official. I was the first politically appointed American Indian in the Trump administration. I was the President Trump's senior job creator in the Department of Interior as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Economic Development. So I firmly believe in the President's America First policy. I think he's been spot on the immigration policies. I fully support the need to control our southern border. Where you were in Sunland Park is about 30 minutes south of where I live in Las Cruces. And where you were in Sunland Park at the We Build the Wall, it was actually an interview that I did with the local Fox affiliate that alerted the We Build the Wall folks to the problem there at the place that's called Monument One. Mm-hmm. You look through that wall. The wall itself is not built entirely on the U.S. border. There's about 30 to 40 feet of territory that still extends before you reach that border with Mexico. But that place where they built that private wall used to be one of the worst drug smuggling and human smuggling corridors in the United States. And we were able to get that wall built and be able to shut that down without doing anything to damage private property rights. But in terms of supporting the president's agenda, I am solidly behind him and will be proud to be campaigning with him in New Mexico.
So it sounds like we can really count on you in the U.S. Senate if you get there to be the disruptor, make things happen. Let me ask you something. The president has called on Mitch McConnell to abandon the Senate man-made 60-vote filibuster rule. And President Trump saying that this has stood in the way, this cloture rule has stood in the way of a lot of good legislation that came out of the House that just stalled in the Senate. If you're in the U.S. Senate, are you going to be able to stand up to Mitch McConnell and say, look, you're one of the votes in the caucus to get rid of the 60-vote cloture rule?
Well, on that, there will be times where I disagree with the president, but I will always make sure that I explain to the president, why I disagree. One area where I disagree, I was actually president of the Native American Law Students Association at Harvard Law School, and so I disagree with the president when he refers to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas, because Pocahontas was a real person. Mm-hmm. I've always told the president he should refer to her as Pocahontas because she's totally fake. But on your question about the filibuster rule, unfortunately, the House is been sending total nonsense across the aisle from one chamber to the other, and the filibuster in many cases is the only way to keep the total insanity coming out of the House. Because I actually believe that the way that we need to govern is not just trying to ram one party's thoughts down. We ought to be able to convince enough Democrats. There are occasionally a Democrat that can do math. There is occasionally a Democrat that can be reasoned with. I mean, not everybody is a radical nut job leftist socialist like AOC and the rest of the squad. So there is a time where we need to be able to pull together people that are the moderates and the more independent-minded folks, and be able to pull together those coalitions. So I'm not quite. I don't think that the filibuster needs to be discarded. There are times where I find it annoying, but overall, it does act as a bulwark to stop the insanity that Nancy Pelosi is spewing, and her assistant speaker Ben Ray Lujan. So in that regard, there'll be times where I have an issue with the president, and then there'll be reasonable disagreements, but there'll be nuanced disagreements in general on the policy of always putting America first. There will be zero daylight between me and the president.
Gavin, let me ask you this: if you get Republican opposition for the nomination contest in New Mexico, which I would assume will happen, do you feel that you're going to be in a position to ask the White House political office for their backing? And do you think if you did that, you'd have it?
Oh, I think so. I mean, the main thing the White House has said is, their question is, can you raise your own resources? Can you raise the money? And so, I'd encourage all of your listeners to go to GavinClarkson.com and hit the donate button, because that's basically what it's going to take. This is a national race. In that it is the only open seat in the entire country that the Democrats are having to defend. And the moment that I announced that I got in the race, Rasmussen re-ranked their predictions on the race. They've called this now the most competitive open U.S. Senate seat in the country. I fully expect to be campaigning with the White House, with the president's team, and particularly because of the pro-life issue. I was at the Susan B. Anthony banquet the other night here in D.C., and they reiterated that, again, the president's team believes that the late-term abortion issue is an issue that is going to turn New Mexico red in 2020, because you're going to have Democrats abandoning the radical abortion positions that their party is maintaining. And there's not going to be anybody who's going to be able to be more credible on that issue on the Republican side than me, because when I was getting my doctorate at the Harvard Business School, I also ran a crisis pregnancy center. I was chairman of the board of a CareNet facility there in Boston. And our message was always one of empowering young women. We made sure that every young woman was empowered to make the choice for life, regardless of personal, family, or financial circumstances. While I was chairman of the board there, we were able to save 973 babies. And so it's something we're on the position of defending life and defending the rights of the unborn. This is the most pro-life president we have ever had, and I will be proud to stand with him side by side.
Thank you, Dr. Gavin Clarkson, Disruptor, New Mexico. He could be the guy. He could be the guy to flip it. John Fredericks Radio Network, thanks for being with us.